I am John, 32 years old, and married for the last 4 years to Zoe, age 30. We met at college in the second year. We were ganged up by the lecturer to prepare a presentation for an entrepreneurship class project. During that project, I was moved by her fast thinking and going for the jugular innovative ideas. We spent countless nights in the library, fueled by cheap coffee and big dreams, working on business plans that we were sure would change the world. It had been extremely tough at first, post-graduation, when I had decided to open my own marketing agency. It was tough going at first. I worked from my parents' garage that first year, living on nothing but ramen noodles and determination. Zoe was my rock during this time. Even though she had taken a job at a big finance firm in the city, she'd spent her weekends helping me think of ideas and pitch to potential clients. Sure enough, things started to pick up, albeit rather slowly. First, a couple of small, local businesses turned into my clients. In another month, a mid-sized tech startup followed. Before I knew it, I had to start hiring employees, and then more employees. And here, 5 years down the line, I am so proud to say that Apex Marketing today has 15 family members, servicing the state. I married Zoe, and we finally married 2 years into my business journey. It was a small ceremony, we didn't have much money, but it was perfect for us. We promised we would always support each other's dreams, no matter what. And for the most part, we have kept that promise. The problem started 6 months ago when Zoe's older brother, Max, 35M, moved back into our city. In truth, I had only met Max a few times before, at our wedding and a couple of family Christmases, but Zoe had always spoken very highly of him. He was her childhood hero, the cool older brother who taught her how to ride a bike and stood up to bullies for her. Max had been a tech startup entrepreneur on the West Coast for a good decade. He was the type who was just going to make it big but for some reason didn't. Now he was unemployed again because his last venture had failed, and his debt was through the roof. Max called Zoe and told her that he was coming home to regroup and plan his next move. I was thrilled. I figured that it would be really good for Zoe to get a fresh start with her brother and was planning ways that we would be able to hang out with him. I even offered him the chance to stay with us for a few weeks until he finds an apartment. Time began to drag into weeks, and these weeks began to be some months. First, it was okay. Max was charming and full of stories about Silicon Valley. He would regale us with tales of the celebrity investors, the lavish launch parties. However, as time went on, I started to find some inconsistencies in his stories. Timelines were a bit off, and the names he was dropping seemed to change with each retelling. Max always found excuses about what was wrong. The apartment or job couldn't be found, rents were high or the market was tough. He was waiting to hear the results about some big opportunity. All the while, he sat in our house, playing video games on our big screen TV and ordering from the most expensive of takeout places on our dime, spending all his other time elsewhere, doing the same thing. I tried to be patient. I would remember how tough it had been when I was starting out, and I wanted to cut Max some slack, but it was getting pretty thin. Our grocery bills had at least doubled, our electricity bill was through the roof, and Max hadn't contributed a dime to anything. Zoe kept covering for him, saying he was under too much strain for a while now and he needed our help. I got it, but at some point, I felt like we were supporting a sense of entitlement. When I'd try to talk to Zoe about it, she'd get defensive. He's family, she'd say. We can't just throw him out on the street. The worst thing that could happen is that Max started taking an interest in my business. I was actually flattered for a minute there. He'd ask what I do, how I do it, what my strategies are, and how I deal with customers. So maybe he was going to try to get back out in the working world and was using me as inspiration, right? But then he started giving me unsolicited advice. He knew enough to criticize the marketing campaigns with which he said we were not cutting edge enough. He could prescribe for me all the things we could do with our website, which would have cost a bomb. He even tried to tell me how to manage my team, though we hadn't met them. I ignored him, but it was becoming irritating. After all, it is not like Max ever established a successful business himself. And he tried to instruct me on the subject. Gradually I started avoiding coming home early, preferring to stay in the office to avoid another episode of Max enlightening me about business. I finally had the migraine last week and decided to come home early. My head was pounding as I stepped into the house and heard Max's voice coming from the home office. He was using the phone to someone, on my computer. At first, I thought nothing of it, maybe he was finally job hunting. But then I heard him mention Mrs. Johnson's name. Mrs. Johnson is one of the biggest clients I have. She owns a chain of boutique hotels and was among the early business trend followers of Apex. To me, her account represents a serious chunk of our yearly revenues. My jaw hit the floor when Max told Mrs. Johnson he was now co-running the agency with me and had some exciting new ideas for her account. In other words, he was trying to hijack my client relationships. I burst into the office and Max went white. He hurriedly ended the call and tried to play it down as one big mistake. He admitted that he was just trying to help, that he thought he could throw some Silicon Valley innovation or relevance in there to light a fire under the idea. But I knew better. This wasn't a bumbling, well-meaning mistake. This was an attempt to ingratiate his way into my business. Who knows how long this had been going on? How many other clients had he contacted? I was furious. This was all the frustration that had been building up in me all these months. I told Max he needed to leave. Not just the office, but our house. I gave him 24 hours to pack his things and get out. He tried to argue that I was overreacting, that he was merely trying to help the family business grow. Family business? He had been living in my house for months without paying rent, providing nothing but criticism and empty promises. And now he had the nerve to claim my hard-earned success as a family business? Zoe had just walked in the middle of our argument. Shocked to the core at seeing us yelling at each other, I thought she would side with me when I told her what had happened. For this was our livelihood Max was messing with. But to my surprise, Zoe was livid with me. She accused me of being a child in my overreaction, of being unkind to her brother. She couldn't understand why I couldn't, or wouldn't, just work with him or even give him a chance. It was like she had forgotten all the late nights, all the sacrifices we'd made to get this business to where it is today. I tried to point out that Max had betrayed my trust and put my client relationships in danger, but Zoe wouldn't have it. She kept saying that must be some mistake, and Max would never mean to steal my business. It has been 3 days since that fateful meeting. Max is still here, imposed on my pleasure. He acts like an injured party, convinced that I am threatened by his supremely better business knowledge. Zoe is barely speaking to me, she is with him all the time, plotting ways of convincing me to let him stay. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. Am I really the asshole for trying to protect my business and wanting to kick someone out who was trying to take advantage of my hospitality? How do I make Zoe understand her brother isn't who she thinks he is? Update 1. I am aware that it has been 2 weeks since I wrote my last entry, and in the interim, there has really been so much happening. Of all, I have to sincerely thank all of you for your advice and support. It really helped me put this into perspective and gave me the guts to act. Things were immediate and incredibly tense after my confrontation with Max. Zoe was still pissed off at me. She only ever said 2 words to me, commenting on my rough treatment of her baby brother. Max, on the other hand, became the professional victim. He would mope around the house, heaving big sighs and saying that he had really only tried to be help to the family. So, I decided to take a step back, gather more information before making a drastic move. I secretly spent a couple of days checking my business records, emails, and recent client interactions. What I found out made my blood run cold. So I called Mrs. Johnson, supposedly to check in after our last meeting. You already know, I told her in a semi-reverent sort of way, that I hoped that call was helpful that you had received from my associate. Mrs. Johnson sounded confused. Oh, you mean your brother-in-law? She said. He seemed nice, but I was a bit surprised when he started talking about completely overhauling our marketing strategy. My heart sank. I inquired of Mrs. Johnson how long ago this conversation had taken place. Oh, about 3 weeks ago, she replied. He's called a couple of times since then, actually. 3 weeks. 3 weeks Max had been contacting my clients behind my back. I thanked Mrs. Johnson and hastily bade goodbye. Then I began calling other clients. What I discovered was something so terrifying, a month-long history of Max talking to some of the largest clients I have. He introduced himself as our partner in his mouthful of acronyms for the very specific services that we did not even offer. One local restaurateur shared that Max promised him to create a revolutionary AI-driven menu optimization system. Another said Max was pitching a blockchain-based loyalty program. Of course, we couldn't and never intended to deliver any of those things. My head reeled. This was too much of a coincidence. And this was certainly no case of mistaken identity. This was sabotage, premeditated malignant intention. What for? To hurt my business from within. Armed with that, I knew I had to talk to Zoe. I found her inside folding clothes in our room. We need to talk, I started. It's about Max. Zoe sighed, she probably prepared for another argument. Definitely, when I handed her the proof in black and white, clients' emails and messages giving an account of up-close conversations with me, realization started to build up through her eyes. I don't understand, she murmured, sliding into bed. Why would he do this? I all but came to tears when she finally believed me, yet, at the same moment, great sadness for the pain this was obviously causing her washed over me with relief, finally. I don't know, but we can't let this continue. Zoe nodded slowly. Enough, she whispered. He has to leave. But when we confronted Max together, things got worse. At first, he tried to deny everything, saying that the clients misunderstood. But he quickly changed his demeanor as we presented him with evidence one after the other. He accused me of turning Zoe against him. You always thought you were better than all of us, didn't you? He accused. You're just scared because you know I could run this company better than you could ever do. But he didn't stop there. Max even accused me of stealing his intellectual property in a court of law by stating that the ideas he had shared when living with us were legally his, and that he had recordings of these conversations where it was clear that I had appropriated his ideas. It was all nonsense. Max had never shared even a remotely practical idea, now this one was threatening him with a lawsuit. Baseless, but the threat of legal action was terrifying. We told him he had 48 hours to move out, or the authorities would be notified. Those 2 days were incredibly tense. Max would try to guilt-trip Zoe, reminding her of their childhood and how she was betraying him, and make veiled threats about ruining my reputation in the industry. But we held our ground. To Zoe's credit, she didn't flinch. She was both hurt and angry, but she stood strong beside me. In the morning, the day he was to leave, we found Max gone. He had left in the course of the night, carrying away some of our electronics and most of the things made out of Zoe's jewelry. We found a note on the kitchen table that simply read, "You'll regret this." We filed a police report, but in all honesty, the chances of our stuff being recovered are slim. What's important is that he's out of our house and our lives. Zoe is extremely upset. She now feels betrayed by her own brother and also starts to feel guilty about not having seen through him a long time ago. She was constantly repeating that she should have listened to me all along, and that she should have noticed the signs. I try my best to comfort her, telling her that now what Max is doing is not her fault. All while I'm in the process of turning my clients from liability to asset. I've been making personal phone calls, sending personal emails, and even sending personal visits to apologize for the confusion and ensure them that Max had absolutely no authority to make any promises about the workings of the deal. But most of my clients have been understanding to me, and I really am just scared about what the long-term effects are going to be on the business's reputation. I've been looking into the legal options to fend off any future interference of the business by Max. Well, it's been a bit of a haywire couple of weeks, but I think I've gotten on the same page with Zoe, finally. We are truly united in this crisis, and in a weird way, it has brought us closer. Our communication has opened up and we talk more than we have in months. I'll keep you updated if something major happens. Thank you all for your support during this crazy time. Update 2. A month has passed since Max left, and things are slowly beginning to fall back into normalcy, the old way. I thought I would just update everyone with what's going on in my world. The good news, I did manage to retain them all after, again, literally a ton of phone calls, emails, personal meetings. Understandably, she was upset at the confusion and had already threatened to place her business elsewhere, but I was most definitely on the rocks of losing Mrs. Johnson. After a very long lunch explaining the situation to her and laying out a new, realistic marketing plan for her hotels, she agreed to stay on board. In fact, this whole ordeal seems to have further strengthened my relations with a certain set of clients, who really respected and valued the honesty and effort that went into writing everything. A few even told me their family business dramas, which helped put things into perspective. Legally, we even spoke to a lawyer about Max's threats. There is no question that Max has no grounds on which to argue an intellectual property claim. His ideas that he may have mentioned in passing while living with us are not the intellectual property, especially when there's no proof that I actually had used any of these so-called ideas in my business. But with Max's erratic behavior and death threats, we did apply for a protective order. This enforces it, in my client's regard, so that he is not allowed near our home or office. It's hoped we will never need to rely on them, but it's reassuring to know that the law is with us in this regard. The police did not have any breakthrough in catching our stolen things. They said unless something comes back through a pawn shop or online sale, they can't do much about it. We have moved on from it all. We have beefed up home security and changed all our passwords and account information just to be safe. The hardest thing this past month has been trying to help Zoe process it all. She's been living with so much guilt and betrayal. Max wasn't just her brother, he was her childhood hero. She's been telling me stories of how Max used to let her tag along with his friends, how he raised her to stand up for herself with blows, how he dared her to continue gymnastics when our parents wanted her to have a safe career. This other side of Max has shocked Zoe to the core. She's been sleeping fitfully and is jumpy whenever the phone rings, fearing it might be Max. She's also been going through old family photos, as if trying to find clues she'd missed into the kind of person Max would become. I told her to go see a counselor to work through her feelings about all of this, but she's pretty resistant to that idea. She says it's just a matter of time, though I do worry. I've tried to be here for her, but, I'll be straight, it's been trying. I can't help but get a bit angry, even. After all, I wised up to Max so much sooner. Then I remember that Zoe had a long history of time spending with Max, so it's not just that she's in any relationship. And then, something out of the blue happened last week. We got a call from Max and Zoe's parents. Max had gone to their place and narrated a whole different story. In his version of what happened, he had come up with all the ideas and I had stolen them. And when he threatened to go to the police, that's when I asked him to leave. He had shown himself to be an innocent victim in Zoe, who had picked me above her purebred brother. Zoe had been on the phone for hours to her parents, explaining what had really occurred. They were as shocked as Zoe. They, too, had regarded Max as a golden child, the one who would go far. The news of his subterfuge and theft hurt them. Luckily, at the end, they did believe us. It helped a lot that we showed them the evidence of Max's actions. They apologized for their son's actions and reassured us that if ever Max contacted them again, they would inform us. I saw that this was a really tough and tiresome conversation for Zoe, although I bet, in some ways, it brought a relief to her. It helped her to realize she was not the only one who had been duped by Max. As for my business, I've taken steps to prevent something like this from happening again. I have put very stringent privacy guidelines in place, and all my workers appreciate the need to button their lips about our clients. There is also an increased sense of caution about what and where I share things at home with respect to work. Pity it has to come to that before I can be careful in my own home, but it did. It has indeed been an awful month, but I am beginning to feel that very gradually things take a turn for the better. Certainly, Zoe and I are talking to each other as we never did previously, and though the experience was so painful, after all, it brought us so much closer together. So, we've had a lot of deep talks connected with belief, loyalty toward one another, family, and what lies ahead of us. I've also felt some positive changes towards my business. This crisis forced me to look hard at the operations I was conducting and at client relationships. I've also started to use new strategies that make it easier to communicate with the client and to conduct the flows of the processes. It sort of pushed me to do things that otherwise I would not have done. To be posted again shortly once something major happens with Max or legally. For now, we are moving on and healing in our personal lives and my business. Update 3, it's been 3 months since my last update, and I wanted to share some final developments in this saga. The biggest news is, Max was arrested 2 weeks ago. Not for anything relating to us, thankfully, but for trying the same scam on another small business owner in the neighboring city. Apparently, he had not learned his lesson and thought he could get away with it again. We learned this when we received a call from a detective. He had been investigating some recent activities of Max and had come up with our police report after he stole all our stuff. He wanted to learn if we would be willing to give a statement regarding our interactions with Max. It was through relating with Zoe that we agreed to cooperate with the inquiry. We spent one afternoon at the police station relating everything to the police. I found it exhausting, remembering everything, but at the same time relieving. The detective informed us that we weren't the only ones Max had tried to jack. There were at least 3 other cases they knew of, all following a similar pattern. Max would ingratiate himself with small business owners, push his way into their operations, and then either steal from them or take over their client relationships. Zoe took the news of Max's arrest hard. After the detective got off the phone with her, I found her crying it out in the bedroom. "I keep thinking about when we were kids," she told me. "How did he go from being my protective big brother to this?" Little by little, though, I think that through the news in the days following, it sort of made Zoe at peace with everything. It really helped her to realize that it was not her fault that Max was being blamed. She has stopped jumping at every ring and sleeps much better now. Good news is, Zoe finally relented and saw a counsel. She has had a couple of meeting sessions by now and says it helps her get to terms with what really happened. She has also been active in rehabilitating some of her old friends that she lost touch with during Max's stay with us. I am very proud of her, for it seems like those are really steps towards healing. Now it's more or less back to business, and all the extra effort I put in to talk to these clients during the crisis weeks has now proved useful. Heck, I even have a couple of new clients out of the ones these clients of Max referred. It seems the way I handled the situation was impressive to such an extent that they went around speaking about my professionalism. Through this, Zoe and I have been able to have deep discussions about the future, realizing that being on the same page about life, particularly family, is paramount. We have gone through lots of conversation regarding our future, testing clearly defined ways on how to handle family requests in the future. We have also begun discussing with each other the issue of how we would like to structure our family. This ordeal has dawned on us that we are strong enough as a team and that we feel up to the challenge of being parents. It is, therefore, amazing to plan what awaits us in the future, as it is not just a matter of reacting to the crises. Last week, finally, we managed to replace the TV that Max had taken when he left. While setting it up, Zoe turned to me and said, "You know, I'm actually glad he took the old one. This new one's much better, and every time I look at it, I'm reminded that we got through this together." Small, but it meant a lot. Looking back, as much as this experience was a struggle, I believe it strengthened our relationship. We learned a lot about communication, trust, and how to stand united in the face of adversity. This has taught us that even within family, setting boundaries is vital. And since then, we have not heard a word from Max, but to be honest, we are just fine with that. We are busy with each other and the life we expect to build together. And should he ever try to come back into our lives, we will know how to stand our ground together. Thanks to all for your support through this journey. Your advice and encouragement helped us to carry on. It truly was a very tough time. Here's to moving forward and leaving the drama behind.